You ready?
Sure.
Okay, so it's 11, so I guess we can get started. All right, thank you, Chair, for coming and visit us today, and thank you for the opportunity to give us a presentation on writing for publishing. And I would like to welcome everyone to the seminar. So I excited to introduce Dr. Jahren, who is the emeritus professor at Iowa State University, where I graduated from, and he was my PhD committee member.
Yes.
Right. So and from the audience, we got graduate student in any undergraduate student here. Okay.
Yeah,
so
great.
and most students from civil engineering, but there's some students from triple E because we recently merged two departments, environmental and civil engineering, into one school.
Yes.
So we're sharing this opportunity to a lot of departments in the same school too.
Great.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna have about 30 or 40 minutes for presentation, and then after that we're gonna have lunch. And during the lunchtime, you can ask additional questions to Dr. Jahren. All right, now I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit more about what I did for research and whatnot, just to give you a little bit more context about me. Is that I was into construction engineering. That's a little bit about our relationship, and then some of the things that were important or we were doing at the time is looking at digital data exchange. That is how in construction you can send plans and specifications and test results and other kinds of things back and forth electronically. And then also innovation in engineering education. So we worked to do hybrid classes that were taught partly online and partly face-to-face. And luckily we did that quite a bit before COVID came along. And so it was handy when that came in. And then I did quite a few things on construction process improvement. And it was everything from gravel roads to bridges to freeways and whatnot. So had the opportunity to research in a lot of different things. My teaching was construction equipment, temporary structures, cost estimating, planning and scheduling. Even did a freshman learning community, and that was really fun. Hello, come on in. Yes, pleased to have you join us. So and then right now, some of the things that I do, I'm an associate editor of the Journal of Construction Engineering and Management, and even though that's my background, the presentation I'm trying to be very general, so it'll work with whatever you're doing in civil and environmental engineering. But I was the editor-in-chief quite a while ago, and also was the chair of the editorial board, which is kind of a position that I moved into after being editor-in-chief to still help out with the journal. And I'm here because I write test questions for the civil engineering, professional engineering exam in Greenville. And so I was here for that. So, I know Tuan here, and it's always fun to see your former PhD students and whatnot. So, for those of you who are in grad school, one of the things that's really fun is, having graduate students. You can look forward to that. And, for undergraduate students, your alumni of Clemson, and you can stay engaged with your university and your professors after that. Generally we really like doing that. And and I'm in the National Academy of Construction and work in a worldwide worldwide professional organization with other professors in construction engineering. So let's get going a little bit about journals. So journal articles. And so if you're writing for publishing in academia, then your target is probably ultimately going to be in an academic journal and an archival journal. That's where you're going to be describing your research, and your research is consequential enough and adds to new knowledge sufficiently so it's put in an archival journal. And then the idea of the archival journal is that whatever you learned is preserved, for eternity, essentially. So that's what we're trying to do. And so I want to talk about the different parts of a journal article, and we'll go through each of them specifically. And so usually there's an introduction and then some background where you're doing a literature review to find out what else has been done previously. And then you'll talk about the methodology of your research. Okay, how did you do the research? And then after you've executed your research, then you're going to have findings. You'll talk about your results. There's going to be some discussion of a little bit more about what happened. And then there are going to be conclusions, recommendations, limitations. So I'll talk about each of those, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what really makes a manuscript good. And what you want is you want something that grabs people's attention, something that people will want to read. And so you're going to try and structure it so it's attractive. You want people to read the abstract, look at the title, and say, "Hey, this is something that I want to read." So let's talk about your introduction. So in the introduction, you're going to have one of the things you're going to do is to start out talking about the objective. And the objective is going to be, okay, what is this manuscript about, and what questions will be answered? Okay, this term here, okay, manuscript, is maybe I should explain that, because as an editor I think about manuscripts and then articles. Okay, manuscript is what the word means is handwritten. Manuscript is like handwritten, and it's like my dad when he did journal articles. He was a geologist. His were, actually handwritten. At one time, you turned in handwritten manuscripts to the editor, and then eventually they typeset them and published them. So we still call them manuscripts before they're accepted to be published. And so I'm going to be talking about manuscripts usually, because that's what I'm emphasizing, is that what you're doing before it's accepted for publication is a manuscript. And what I'm trying to talk about here is how can you get that manuscript accepted. So anyhow, in the objective, that's one of the things one of the sections of the manuscript. So you'll want to say right away, what is the manuscript about, and what questions will be answered. And it's important to be clear about this, because one of the things you folks are maybe finding out is that each one of you is doing very different things, and you're interested in a very narrow set of knowledge, because that's how you're going to build on that knowledge. So you don't want to waste time reading a journal article that's not in your area and not gonna answer your questions. So if the thing's ambiguous about what this is all about, you're probably, somebody else who's thinking about reading it is probably just going to blow by it, because they have better things to do. I mean, they want to get right down into is this the thing that I'm interested in? So you're trying to reach out for people who are interested in what you're doing. So you want to be very clear about these questions. And then the other thing is a justification. And then that's, why is this manuscript important to read? And then what knowledge gap is going to be filled. And this gets back to the idea of new knowledge, because each of you, as you're doing research here, you're trying to find out, okay, what has already been done and what am I going to do new that will that will advance knowledge? What is it that I've found out that's new? So you want to be very clear about that. Okay. And so one of the things in this process of establishing that you've created new knowledge, you found out something new, is that you'll want to go, that you need to go through and do a literature review. You want to find everything that's published on whatever, on your topic. So so as you're doing your literature review, think about your research as you begin. You may not know everything about what you'll need in your literature review, or what you'll need to do your research. So you start out and you'll do a fairly broad literature review. And as you start doing your research, you're going to find out that some of the things that you read may not be relevant to what you're doing, because, a part in doing research is that you're going to do something that nobody else has done. So then that means you don't know what you need to read ahead of time. So because of that, you're going to be reading some things and reviewing some things that are not useful in the end. So hazard in writing a manuscript is that you did so much work reading literature that you'd like to say something about everything you read. But you don't want to do that, because then that's going to waste time for the reader of your article. So you want to be very, very efficient for them. So part of your work is that you're looking at literature and deciding that you made some mistakes. Well, you didn't make some mistakes. Actually, you're going to have to read more than what you need in the end, but you're sorting things out for people. You're actually curating literature and saying only what's important. And one of the things is that after writing the conclusions, when you get to the end, then you want to go back through. If you wrote your literature review earlier, you want to go back through and look at your literature review and start crossing off things that aren't important to your conclusions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but this is something to think about. Lots of times as an editor, I'll see comments from reviewers, the people who are deciding whether or not your material should be published. And lots of times they'll give guidance that there's too much irrelevant literature being cited here. And it's a waste of space and it's a waste of time. And you can increase your credibility with the reviewers by just eliminating anything that isn't really relevant. You always want to be thinking about that. Okay. And and then another thing is to highlight seminal references. Okay, when I say seminal, that means the references that are really important to your line of inquiry. There are some references that maybe go back several years. They're the references that started a lot of other references. So if you start reading literature and every piece of literature that you read cites a certain reference, then that's a seminal reference because everybody else is citing that reference. So then you want to actually acknowledge that this is a seminal reference because that's going to increase your credibility. It says, okay, I know what the important references are. I know how this line of inquiry started. So you're always trying to improve your credibility by showing that you know all this, all these different things. And then finally, you want to clearly demonstrate what your point of departure is. Okay, so there's the new knowledge that you're giving to the world by writing this journal article. And then there's the last piece of literature that you're citing that came the closest to what you've learned, the jumping off point for what you did. And, it might be one reference, it might be maybe 4 or 5 different references, 4 or 5 people who got close. You might look at 4 or 5 different investigations and say, look, I can combine the knowledge of these and then I'm going to get here. But what you want to do is to say, look, this is the point of departure here. This is the end of the old knowledge, and from here, everything that I'm doing is going to be new knowledge. And one of the things people do is they sometimes assume that it'll be kind of implied that you won't have to explicitly say what your point of departure is. You think that maybe the reader will just kind of get it without having to point it out specifically. But you don't want to do that. You want to make it very clear to the reader that, look, this is where the old knowledge ends, and this is where my new knowledge begins. Because as people evaluate your manuscript, one of the things that they're going to be doing is they're going to be looking for that new knowledge. And so you just want to make it very clear that, look, this is what I think is new knowledge. This is what I'm putting out there as new knowledge. Okay, now the next thing is we'll talk about the methodology. So this is what you actually did. And I think this is sometimes can be the easiest part because of writing, because now you're just telling people what you did. But remember, when you're just telling people what you did, what you're doing is you're telling the story of what you did. So try to think about kind of a narrative of how you did this. And another thing is that as you do your methodology, since you're going for new knowledge and it's things that people have never done, you're going to go down some dead ends. You're going to start trying to do things and it doesn't work out. And you don't want to spend too much time talking about the things that were unproductive for you. In some cases, it might be okay because you might be able to tell somebody who's following you, don't waste your time on this. But you need to be very short about it because what people are interested in is, what is the new knowledge? They aren't interested in all the things that didn't go as expected. So don't spend a lot of time talking about your dead ends. Okay, so during this investigation process, I have here talk about protocols for sampling, testing, simulating, analyzing, things like that. So when there's a protocol, in some cases, you might be using an analysis technique, sampling technique, any of these things that have been previously used by other people. and you will increase your credibility by saying that, look, this has been used successfully in the past for this kind of an analysis. And then that's going to be linked back to your literature review because you've already talked about that analysis process in the literature review. So then you've used it, it's been used successfully in the past, and so then that's a good thing. Now, one of the things is that in a lot of cases, though, since you're doing something new, you won't be able to use exactly the protocol that somebody used before. So then you need to be very clear about why you deviated from the protocol, and give a clear rationale for why you think that the way you did it is better. But the more you can link it back to things that have been done in the past, that's a good thing. Another thing here, an important idea here, is validating. And so the idea with validating is that you've done your methodology. Now, how do you know for sure that your results are correct? What did you do to do that? So is there some way that you've cross-checked things? And now, lots of us are doing very quantitative type work, and then validation can be that you tested something and you used two different tests that should end up with the same result. And when you did both of the tests, you did end up with the same result. So then that's a pretty solid validation. But some of us do qualitative research where we do mostly interviews and we don't have any quantitative data. So sometimes validation will be something like going out and talking to some experts and just asking them, does this make sense? And so you want to think about all the different ways something can be validated. And then you need to very accurately describe what your validation process is, because a lot of them are named in certain ways. And just reading a journal article on how things can be validated in your area can be a good thing, because then you can be quite precise about exactly what you did. And again, this will increase your credibility. As you increase your credibility, you increase your chances for acceptance. And again, so I've already talked about these last couple of bullet points. That's what I was talking about there. Okay, findings, results, discussions. Okay, how you do this will just depend on the methodology and the outcome. So you're kind of on your own. One good reason to do a literature review is that you get to read a lot of writings in your area, and with that, you're going to see a lot of different ways that people have done findings, results, and discussions. So you want to, as you're reading, you want to remember how other people did it. Ask yourself, do you like the way they did it? Did you not like the way they did it? So that's one way to figure out what to do. But again, quite a bit you're on your own, because you're doing your own thing, and you just kind of have to figure out how to do this. Okay, good figures and tables will be helpful. One big mistake that I see people do is they'll put in a table and say, here's the table and here's the results, and then go on, here's the next table and here are the results. Okay, just to put out the table there, I mean, it is something but you're not helping the reader out by going through and talking about what's in the table and why is that interesting. So you want to highlight the things that tell you what your results are. Okay, you've got to think ahead that you're going to come up with some conclusions I'll be talking to you about in the next slide. But you know those conclusions are coming, and probably by the time you write this, you probably already know what your conclusions are. So start thinking about your conclusions and then start figuring about what figures and tables will help people understand that you have the right conclusions. And then you have to figure out what you're going to write about the figures and tables to help people understand that you came to the right conclusions, or why those conclusions are the conclusions that you should come up with. So don't ever just, put in a table and not say anything about it. Put in the table and then talk about provide the bridge between the table and those conclusions that are going to be coming up. And then include interesting details, don't get bogged down. So yeah, you have to talk about the table, but you don't talk about everything in the table, everything in the figure. And then, again, this thing, just like you revisit your literature review after you've written your conclusions, you revisit your tables, you revisit this area and try and fine tune it a little bit. Make sure there's that link to the conclusions and that, it helps to advance the conclusions. So add things, get rid of things. Okay, so here's conclusions, limitations, recommendations. Okay, so the conclusions should flow from the previous section. One thing that I'll find that as I'm reading a journal article that will cause me to instantly lose, degrade the author's credibility is when they give a conclusion that is true, but didn't have anything to do with the research that they did. Okay, so you can come up with a conclusion like okay, and in construction engineering, a lot of us think that if you do design, bid, build type contracting, that is that you have a complete design and then contractors bid and you take the lowest price contractor, then you try and build that. You might have more. You might have a less. You might have more arguments during the construction and stuff because things are more adversarial or whatever. So I mean, somebody could write something on contracting and then just come up with a conclusion like that. Everybody seems to know it, but they just put it in, and that's a very extreme case to do something like that. But you want to think about, does your conclusion, does it actually flow out of the new knowledge that you've come into? Because there are other things that are true that you could conclude, but and they would be true, but they didn't flow out of your research. And then the next thing you want to talk about, how can these things be generalized? Because you could come up with new knowledge for a particular situation, like one design, one construction project, one environmental engineering process, one waste treatment plant or whatever. You could study it and say, okay, this is how this waste treatment plant operated. But that's usually that's not considered research. That's a study of a particular waste treatment plant. What you're trying to do is to come up with new knowledge that can be applied to all kinds of different situations. So if you can do a study on a waste treatment plant and then just say that this is an example of a waste treatment plant that's typical for a wide variety of circumstances, then and the conclusions I've come up with can be applied to 1,000 different waste treatment plants, then that gets to be research. But if all you've done is to come up with new knowledge about the waste treatment plant in Clemson, then that's not research, that's the study of the waste treatment plant in Clemson. Okay, and I see these also that somebody does a study in a particular country, and then they publish it in an international journal. So okay, this is true. We found out that this is true in Korea, but if it's an international journal, we'd like to know that it's more generally true. So then, you might do the study in Korea, but you'd have to convince the reviewers that, even though it was done in Korea, maybe the way things are done in Korea is the same as they're done in quite a few other places in the rest of the world. So what we learned here applies more broadly internationally. Not maybe in every country, but at least it applies in a lot of other places. So that's something that you want to do. And then another thing that you're going to want to talk about is the limitations, because we only have so much time to do research, and so you just run out of resources, so you can't do everything to make it perfect. So you'll talk about what limitations you have, and it's kind of like, well, despite we came up with these conclusions, and despite these limitations, these conclusions are still valid. And but if you say that there are limitations, that increases your credibility, because a reviewer is going to go through and they're going to see, well, there were some limitations here, but if you don't declare them, then you lose credibility, because it's like you don't even know what your limitations are. So you want to have that, and then you can come up with recommendations, and then so that's how things should change going forward, how practicing engineers can do better, and then your limitations can give you ideas for further research, and then you're writing maybe to yourself, maybe to other colleagues, that okay, you've read this, here's something that you can do now. Maybe some other PhD student will read your work and say, hey, I'd like to eliminate this eliminate this limitation. I know how to do it, and I'll go ahead. And again, the recommendation should flow from your investigation. So your conclusions and limitations, they both flow from your investigation. Okay, so some more things about a good manuscript is that some more things, just to kind of summarize. First of all, it should. I'm going to skip this one and kind of come back to them. Let's just talk about is generalizable, is consequential. So, and we just talked about that. Is consequential, really makes a difference. has a strong sense of narrative in the writing. So you can kind of sit down and it kind of comes off as this story of what's being done. And okay, so a good story of an investigation is, first of all, a reason to listen and read. And one of the things that I want you to think about is TV shows. Okay, for TV shows, everybody's trying to grab the audience's attention. So what do they do? Do they first show a commercial? Do people want to see a commercial? No. I mean, there's a lot of TV shows where they'll start out with something that's happening in the TV show. You know, a detective thing and somebody shot, or you can tell that something big has come down. Then there's the opening of the show that everybody knows about, and but you're hooked. Okay, so you want to be clever and think about that in the same way. Now it's a little bit different because your audience isn't just everybody who's sitting around on the couch trying to chill out for the evening or something like that. You're looking for a very narrow audience of just the people who are interested in what you're doing, but what's going to grab their attention. And those are the things that you want in that introduction. So, people, the audience that you want is going to read what you have. Okay. And then you kind of set up the thing. So again, go to a good TV show and it's this detective thing and, some crime has happened. And so you start meeting some of the different, the police, the lawyers, some of the criminal element and things like that. You're trying to understand who they are and whatnot. So I mean, that's the background and the literature review, and then you get into the story, the investigation and all that kind of thing, and you go into the autopsy room and you go into the you follow the detectives as they go around and try and arrest people and stuff like that. There's the story, and then finally you come to the moral of the story, the conclusions or whatever. So then, okay, maybe the criminals are in the courtroom now, and the judge is giving their verdict, and all those kinds of things. But again, think of a good TV show and how everything just kind of fits together, and it's compelling. It holds your attention, and then finally at the end, a good TV show. I mean, sometimes they have kind of like a serial thing, so they give you part of the story, but then there's going to be some more story coming. Okay, Star Wars and various movies. They set up a franchise, and there's going to be Star Wars 1, Star Wars 2, Star Wars 3, and there's always something at the end, and there's going to be another movie, and what's that going to be? Well, that can be your limitations and recommendations. Is well, there's more to research here. This is pretty cool stuff. The story doesn't end here. Okay, so put a little bit of Hollywood into your manuscript. So I'm going to back up to this. Fits the aim, scope, and style of the publishing venue. Okay, so you can go to the website of the publication, and they'll have the aim, scope, and all that kind of thing. But if you've done a good job on your literature review, you'll have read articles in probably the journals that you will probably publish in. So, make your own thoughts about what kind of writing do these journals appreciate? And is the kind of writing that I want to do, is that going to fit? And your advisor will help you out with some of these things. But really, start reading your literature with the idea of, could I publish here? And, what kind of writing does this particular journal want? And sometimes you'll see pretty big differences in them. Okay, so I'll talk about the journal to which I was involved in. It's in construction because I'm a construction specialist, but you'll find the same thing in environmental engineering, structural engineering, materials, and I'm sure that your advisors have already mentioned some of these kinds of things. But I'll mention it again, just because it's important. So just for the Journal of Construction Engineering and Management. Okay, so I used to be an editor-in-chief. Now there's a new editor-in-chief at the University of Texas. And the immediate past editor-in-chief is the director of the school here, Jesus de la Garza. He prefers that I call him Chema, and I'm not sure what you folks, how he's addressed here. And it's got 52 editorial board members. So, and then, I'm just an editorial board member now, so this isn't official policy, but this is just kind of my view of the thing. And so the emphasis for this journal is clear explanations and a rigorous methodology. So I describe it as a methodological research journal. And, there are other journals that are maybe not quite so methodological because there are other things that are research and they're worth reading and they're consequential and whatnot, but they're a little bit more maybe opinions of somebody who's had a lot of experience. And they tend to be fairly verbose and whatnot. And I enjoy reading them, but they never get published here because, the research methodology is kind of like, well, I've lived this life for quite a while, and these are the things that I know. And, that can be valid and consequential and everything, but we don't do this, okay? And then another thing is the concise, compact writing style, not verbose, okay? So for me to publish in this journal, early on, one of the things that I needed to do was to go through the manuscript with a fine-tooth comb and eliminate every possible word that I could. And, I'd read journal articles in there and see how they did it. And I'd go through and just cut every possible word that I could. Okay, and then it's a generalist journal. Okay, so it's a journal of construction engineering and management. So it's like everything that Tuan and I and your other Tin, yeah, do. So it's pretty broad, and you can imagine in structural engineering, environmental engineering. I mean, they're broad topics. If you have the Journal of Environmental Engineering, there's an awful lot of different things in there. Okay, so it's a generalist title. That means that your manuscripts have to be understandable for readers who are not experts in this sub area, and yet it's supposed to be concise. Okay, so how do you make it clear to everybody but keep it short? Okay, so it can be a pretty tough journal to work in, and then a narrative flow is appreciated. So how do you keep this narrative flow, keep it concise, all those kinds of things, and then demonstrate generalizable conclusions. And so there's just a lot to do, a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. But again, if qualitative research, rigorously done qualitative research that doesn't have a lot of numerical kinds of things in it and whatnot, is valid and valuable and consequential and whatnot. And some of it is published in this journal. If it's got a strong methodology, if they can convince people that the conclusions are valid, and all that kind of thing too. So there's an award-winning paper that was an ethnographic study, and it was a lady who, a female professor, who interviewed a bunch of people about subcontractor safety in Melbourne, Australia, and beautiful piece of work, but nothing quantitative about it. So, but again, what she did, it was, very concise and made it understandable for everybody. You could read it. It was an easy read, and she was able to say that, the way things go between subcontractors and prime contractors in Melbourne, Australia, is kind of generally true of maybe Europe and the US and stuff like that. She was able to provide enough of an explanation to, make it seem like it was internationally applicable. So that was the thing. So that's my presentation here. And
all right, thank you,
yeah,
Chuck.
yeah.
Just a few more things before we open to a Q&A.
Yeah.
So, would you clarify a little bit the difference between literature review and background check? Are those like interchangeable terminologies? So,
Yeah, to me, I think I've seen that. Yeah, or maybe a literature review will be within a background and something. I don't know. Have you seen that differently, or how's that look from your point of view?
Yeah, to me, they pretty much like interchangeable.
Yeah.
Like 90%.
Yeah.
The remaining 10% is like knowledge. That's like somebody who is not familiar with the topic can understand the topic.
Well, that brings up a good thing, is that, okay, as a curator of, and I use curating because that's what somebody in a museum does. Okay, you figure out, what are the important things to have in this museum, and then you figure out how they're going to be displayed, and whatever writing or other things, and in some museums you get an audio thing, so then you hear a narrator telling you about the stuff. So, part of your job in curating literature is to put all the kind of the connective tissue together. I mean, you kind of have the bones, which are the actual citations and whatnot. But then, in addition, you have all the flesh and skin and all the other connective tissues that kind of hold it together. And your writing has to kind of do that. And then again, just the idea of this is going to be a total narrative. So you're trying to think ahead, just like a showrunner for a TV show or something, script writer, you're trying to figure out what you're going to have the characters say that's going to make the conclusion make sense.
Yeah. Okay. And the second question is like, what would be the optimal sequence of writing a journal paper? Like, which part of the paper should you develop first, and which part's going to be the last? section that you write?
Yeah, I think probably the first thing to do would be to come up with draft objectives. And again, I'll say draft objectives because that's and that's something that you're doing, I think, at the beginning of your investigation. You've just found out, well, this is, my advisor has funding to do this or whatever, and what are the objectives? So I'd say, if you know what you want to do, the questions, what questions are going to be answered, what new knowledge needs to be generated, what's the gap, what's the research gap. If you get a chance, if you can ever talk with some practitioners who, somebody who will use your research, why do they need this? How's this going to make the world better or whatever? Or if you can ask your advisor or somebody else. I mean, with some research, you've got this project, it's funded, but you may be a little bit removed from the people who are funding it or something. But try and figure out what good is this going to do. And then I think that if you can get that, that's going to kind of set the whole project on the right direction. But I'd say, then again, to do the project, I mean, you're going to have to do your literature review fairly early because it's going to be, okay, how are we going to do this? What processes are we going to use, and all that kind of thing. So, and then you're going to write a draft literature review, and and then you do your methodology, and you can start writing a draft methodology, and and then once you get, while you're executing your methodology, you're going to start to interpret your findings and try and come up with some provisional ideas of what it is that you found and stuff like that. But then again, that's going to be a draft of that. And then, sometime during your investigations, you might be able to project what conclusions you might be able to make. You can start thinking about that. You don't know for sure because you aren't done, but it would be good to maybe start thinking about that. Don't get so you like them too much, because as an investigation goes on, you might find out that your draft conclusions were wrong, and you have to be able to let them go if they're wrong. And and then finally you write your conclusions, and then you have to go back through all that draft stuff and sync them up with the conclusions, because again, you want everything to drive towards those conclusions. You just want to kind of help people understand that these must be the right conclusions here. I mean, it's just, it's obvious.
All right, thank you. Now I'm gonna open it up to everyone. So make sure you ask as many questions as you have. To Dr. Jahren. It could be about writing. It could be about the review process, how to address reviewer comments. So just feel free to ask. I'm gonna go out and get the lunch. So please go ahead.
Yeah. Great. Yes.
Yeah, that's really thank you for the older that. So I saw some like when they still really difficult that they usually publish the review first. Then they use, and for the review paper they give us like things we need to do, like the limitation recommendation. Then they start to do the experiment based on their review. Then they publish their review paper. Do you think this is more like the general process? All the papers you have to review first, and at the end experiment like this, and we thought it's like the general idea of publishing.
Think so. Let's see. I'm not say that again. I'm not.
So I saw some groups like when they receive a huge project,
Yes.
so usually come up with a review paper first.
Yes.
Like what they are.
Oh.
They are going like what's the paper related to they are going to do. Then they come up with a review paper.
Yes.
Like
and then that can be published.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yes. Now that's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one thing I didn't really address too is how you can use other publications to kind of build up to the final publication, because you can do conference papers, and you can do state of the art reviews and other things. And let's see. So yeah, that kind of thing happens. Are there some more questions that kind of go with that?
Yeah, just want to ask, like, if that review paper would be really important, like if you separate your one manuscript into two parts.
Oh yeah, okay. Now there's another thing that we talk about with salami science, where people take a big project, and then you get into a question of how many papers are you going to get out of it, and the more papers you make, then sometimes things get to be less and less consequential. So you might end up with 5 rather inconsequential papers that, if you put them all together into one paper, you might come up with one, journal article that's very consequential. And so then that's, there's that balance that you kind of have to figure out. And then another thing is that you want to be very mindful of the journal's kind of requirements in terms of new content that goes into the journal article. Like I'm familiar with ASCE, and if a paper has been published as an ASCE conference paper, then to be a journal article, there has to be at least 50% new content. So you have to be able to say that you were able to go beyond whatever the conference paper was. Now the thing is, I think it is a really good idea to consider writing conference papers on your topic, and maybe writing a state-of-the-art review paper before you before you write your bigger article and stuff like that. Because, well, doing the conference paper, especially if you present it, it helps you with skills and things like that. If you go to the conference, you meet people that you start to meet your audience. And you're going to get a better idea of how do you write to that audience and whatnot. I mean, it kind of helps if you can meet some people who might be interested in reading your paper and reading your article, and you can think about how you would write to that person. So it is so I think it makes sense to do that. But there have been times when we've written a very nice conference paper, and then turned in a journal article later, and they said, well, it's too much like the conference paper, and you need to go a little bit beyond that. So there's a certain amount of judgment involved in, what's consequential and what isn't. In terms of review papers, the paper that I've been involved in that's the most cited is a state-of-the-art review. So, that's, they can be tremendously helpful to everybody else, because then what you're doing is you're doing the literature review, and then you're kind of giving that out to the rest of the academic community, and you can save those folks a lot of time, and knowledge discovery can go ahead quite a bit faster. So sometimes that is for us, it was an excellent strategy. It was highly cited, and it did a lot of good.
All right. I guess lunch is ready, so I guess we can grab lunch and then we can ask more questions during lunch. So Chuck, go ahead and grab.
Okay.